A. VPT Comparative Biology Study of Survival Fitness, Human vs. Pig, number 1437, VPT Sharp 010, November 14, 2025. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Biology and Zoology. Subfields: Comparative Biology, Evolutionary Biology, Systems Biology, Behavioral Ecology, Comparative Cognition, Theoretical Biology. Preface: This study was inspired by my recent VPT life journey analysis under the category of social science, where I discovered that my own 62-year progression was dominated by wisdom and care, while ambition played only a minor and temporary role. However, that research focused mainly on human social environments. Nevertheless, this personal insight naturally led me to ask a broader biological question: why do human beings become the most intelligent and the most capable of all creatures on Earth? This question touches the same human elements of self-fulfillment, wisdom, care, and ambition, but extends far beyond social behavior. It leads directly into a much wider scientific investigation. How large is the difference between human beings and other living species, for example, pigs, dogs, or horses, in terms of long-term survival fitness? This traditional saying of human superiority is widely accepted by human beings, yet the scientific explanation behind it has never been established. Through a quantitative systems model, most biological studies compare brain size, anatomy, instinct, or behavior, but they do not treat survival as a dynamic system, with output strain produced by multiple interacting input stressors over a long period of time. In addition, those interactions between the strain and multiple stressors are dynamic, nonlinear, path-dependent, and often irreversible. To the best of my knowledge, there is no published study in the literature of evolutionary biology, anthropology, or zoology that compares species-level survival using a dynamic nonlinear, irreversible, and time-dependent viscoplastic quantitative model. More importantly, no researcher has ever applied viscoplastic energy differences and topological geometric variations, the so-called viscoplastopology or VPT method, to the study of species-level survivability. Therefore, this particular paper number 1437 introduces a new methodology inside biology and zoology. I apply the VPT research method to compare the long-term survival fitness of humans and pigs across 5 selected life periods: birth, baby, youth, mature, and elderly. In order to avoid wasting any useful data elements during computation, I also insert an artificial period 0 as the initial baseline condition. I then treat survival as the strain, and cognition intelligence, cognitive, physical capability, strength, and environmental adaptation, adapt, as the 3 influential factors or input stressors. These stressors evolve with age and are weighted according to biological significance of survivability: 45% for cognition, 25% for strength, and 30% for adaptation. These 3 weighting factors also reflect the universal pattern identified in my personal VPT life journey study, where wisdom, brain cognition, and care, heart reactions, dominated my long-term personal outcomes, while ambition, the drive for fame, power, and wealth, ranked the lowest. I selected the pig as the comparison species, because pigs are relatively intelligent among non-human animals and physically strong compared with humans, yet they lack cultural, technological, innovative, and adaptive capabilities. This contrast provides an appropriate and meaningful basis to evaluate the scientific foundation behind the familiar expression that human beings are the most intelligent and capable of all creatures. Research methods. The strain variable is survival, defined as a dimensionless index, ranging from 0 to 100, representing species-level survival fitness across the life cycle. Typical lifespan of a domesticated pig is about from 10 to 15 years, while humans have a natural lifespan of about from 75 to 90 years. The 3 selected stressors are cognition, cognitive, learning, memory, language, planning, problem solving; physical strength, physical power, speed, robustness, resistance to external threats; environmental adaptation, adapt, behavioral plasticity; environmental learning, culture, technology. The weighting factors are: A is 0.45 for cognition, B is 0.25 for strength, C is 0.30 for adaptation. Survival is calculated at each period using survival equals 0.45 times cognitive plus 0.25 times strength plus 0.30 times adapt. The 6 longitudinal periods are P0 initial, P1 birth, P2 baby, P3 youth, P4 mature, P5 elderly. Both species, human and pig, were assigned the same normalization values of 1 for all 3 input stressors, in order to compare their influences on a consistent and fair baseline. Therefore, their input values and stress values are identical. The stressors and strain values were entered into my VMT medical AI research software on my iPhone to calculate stress-strain energy curves, survival trajectories, VMT energy areas, and cumulative energy percent distributions. These results form the basis of the VPT interpretation. The selected input values for cognition, physical strength, and adaptability, used in this VPT study are grounded in well-established findings from many literature articles of comparative biology, evolutionary anthropology, and behavioral ecology. A sample list of referenced literature is provided at the end of this paper. These values reflect widely documented differences in mammalian brain function, muscular capability, and adaptive behavioral flexibility between humans and pigs, based on peer-reviewed research in cognition studies, comparative physiology, and animal behavior. VMT analysis results. This section summarizes the energy findings of viscoplastic medicine theory, VMT, using my medical AI software and PC Excel-based calculations. First, stress-strain trajectories. The human stress-strain energy curves for cognition, strength, and adaptation climb gradually. Through P1, birth, and P2, baby, accelerate sharply in P3, youth, and reach their maximum values during P4, mature life. A decline occurs at P5, elderly, but the human curves remain in the upper region of the stress-strain space. The largest growth region occurs from P2, baby, to P4, mature, driven by rapid increases in cognition and adaptation. The pig stress-strain curves follow a similar pattern, but with very different degrees. Strength rises strongly between P1, birth, and P3, youth, but cognition and adaptation stay relatively low across all periods. The pig curves reach modest peaks in P3, youth, and P4, mature, then decline sharply at P5, elderly. In summary, the pig energy paths remain confined to a low cognition, high-strength region that never approaches the human trajectory. The energy difference is clear. The human trajectories migrate into a high cognition and high adaptation domain, while pig trajectories remain in a low cognition domain, dominated by stronger physical capability. This is also why pigs, like cattle, have historically become major food sources for human populations in many parts of the world, especially pork in Asia and beef in the United States. Humans developed agriculture, domestication, and organized food production systems through superior cognition and adaptation, while pigs, and in many cases cattle as well, followed a fundamentally different biological survival path. Their physical strength and limited adaptive capability placed them within the group of species that became domesticated for human use. This divergence reflects two entirely different survival strategies. Survivability curves. The human survival curve rises from 0 at P0, initial point, to 7 at P1, birth, then jumps to 24.5 at P2, baby, and 60.0 at P3, youth. It reaches the maximum of 90.0 at P4, mature, before declining to 70.5 at P5, elderly. The shape of this curve shows rapid improvement during youth, full capability during maturity, and only partial decline in old age, irreversibility. The pig survival curve increases from 0 to 7.3 at P1, birth, grows to 24.5 at P2, baby, and climbs to 48.5 at P3, youth. It peaks at 56.5 during P4, mature, then falls sharply to 32.0 at P5, elderly. The slope of the pig curve is flatter, and the peak is substantially lower than the human curve. Pig survival is driven primarily by physical strength, rather than cognition or adaptation. However, this physical strength ultimately placed pigs within the group of species that became domesticated, and used as a food source by human beings. The human curve rises higher and faster, confirming superior survival fitness in a dynamic, nonlinear and irreversible manner. Cumulative VMT energy percent. Human VMT energy contributions are: cognition is 39%, strength is 26%, adaptation is 35%. Humans' cognition plus adaptation is 74%. Pig energy contributions are: cognition is 29%, strength is 52%, adaptation is 19%. Pigs' cognition plus adaptation is 48%. These results show that human survival is driven by cognition and adaptation, which together account for 74% of total energy. In contrast, pig survival depends primarily on physical strength, which contributes more than half the total energy, 52%. The pig lacks the adaptive and cognitive mechanisms required for long-term biological dominance and survivability. VMT interpretation and comparative reflection. The VMT interpretation shows that human survival advantages arise from the combined strengths of cognition and adaptation over time. The human trajectories move upward into regions of high cognitive and adaptive value, creating a viscoplastic acceleration effect that steadily increases survival fitness. The pig trajectories remain constrained, driven mostly by physical strength, with limited ability to move into higher dimensional cognitive or adaptive zones. This species-level insight is identical to the principle discovered in my own VPT life journey study. In my personal case, wisdom, cognition 46%, and care or compassion, adaptability, 43%, dominated my 62-year life pattern, producing long-term progress, stability, and fulfillment. Ambition, for fame, power, wealth, and recognition, played only minor roles, 11%. The same principle applies in this study of comparative biological evolution. Humans dominate not because of physical force, but because cognition and adaptation generate far greater cumulative energy. Therefore, the human species becomes the most intelligent and capable creature, not through strength, but through dynamic, nonlinear, and admirable expansion in cognition and adaptability across life periods and across generations. They have a cumulative effect on development, progression, and survivability of the human species on Earth. TDA analysis results, using the 5 developmental periods, P0 to P5, as the longitudinal axis. I applied topological data analysis, TDA, to examine the geometric shapes, data point, connectivity, and trajectory deformation of the two species, humans versus pigs. The goal was to understand how the 3 components of survival capability evolve and how the geometric shapes differ between humans and pigs. For humans, the 4-dimensional data point cloud shows a monotonic expansion in the cognitive and adapt dimensions. Both begin near 0 at P0, initial, rise sharply during P2, baby, and P3, youth, and reach their highest values at P4, mature. Even at P5, elderly, the human geometric structure retains a high cognitive score, and a sustained adapt score, so the topology forms a one-directional, upward migrating manifold. The human P5 elderly stage of both high cognition and high adaptability is also reflected in my own life journey. I began my self-study and medical research work at age 63, and to date at age 79, I have written 1,437 papers across biomedicine, psychology, economics, social science, and now zoology for the first time. This human geometric shape resembles a smooth, rising surface with no collapse, indicating stable and continuous enhancement of cognition and adaptation throughout the human lifespan. Strength in humans increases during P1, birth, through P3, youth, peaks at P4, mature, and declines at P5, elderly, but its decline does not break the continuity of the geometric manifold. Instead, topology shows that the cognitive and adapt components dominate the overall geometry, pulling the entire trajectory into a high cognition, high adaptation region. This produces a clear dimensional migration from a low-dimensional cluster at P0 into a more expanded, high-dimensional cloud after P3. The persistent homology barcode confirms this pattern. Early short bars in P0 P1 disappear, replaced by long, persistent bars from P3 P5 reflecting stable topological features. Here, the chart shows which geometric patterns are weak and short-lived, and which ones are strong and persist across different scales. The life geometry of human survivability becomes cognition-driven rather than physical strength-driven. For pigs, the data point cloud forms a very different topological pattern. Cognitive values remain extremely low across all periods, never exceeding 0.4. Adapt values follow the same flat trend. Physical strength, however, becomes the dominant axis. From P1, birth, through P4, mature, pig physical strength expands rapidly and becomes the primary contributor to the geometric shape. The topological structure therefore spreads horizontally along the strength axis, but remains thin in the cognitive and adapt directions. This creates a flat, strength-dominated sheet rather than a rising multidimensional manifold like human beings. At P5, elderly, pig physical strength declines sharply along with survival, causing the manifold to fold inward. Persistent homology shows that long bars do not survive into late periods, meaning the pig survival geometry collapses after maturity. Unlike humans, pigs do not transition into a higher, adaptive or cognitive domain. Their topology stays low-dimensional and physical strength-centric. Either way, homology in TDA means identifying the stable, geometric features inside a dataset. It detects connected components, loops, holes, and voids that remain present across different scales. These stable features show the underlying structure and behavior of the system. The most important finding from TDA is the divergence of geometric direction after P3, youth. Human topology bends upward into a cognition adaptation domain and stays there. Pig topology expands only in strength, peaks at P4, and then contracts. This confirms that these two species follow different, long-term survival strategies. Humans rely increasingly on cognition and adaptation as the primary axes of survival. Pigs rely mainly on physical strength, a trait that eventually declines and causes the topology to collapse. This explains why the human manifold becomes dominant, and why pig trajectories ultimately converge toward becoming a food resource for humans, rather than a competing survival system. Combined conclusion. This study represents the first application of my VPT method, viscoplastopology, to comparative biology and zoology, by treating survivability as the output strain and cognition, physical strength, and environmental adaptation as three nonlinear, dynamic, and time-dependent stressors. The VPT framework provides a clear mechanistic explanation for why humans achieve far higher survival fitness than pigs across the lifespan. The main reasons are human superior brain cognition and environmental adaptation abilities, which allow human beings to become the most capable and resilient survivors on Earth. This explanation also reflects my own life journey, where my achievements have mainly come from the wisdom of my mind and the care of my heart for others. The VMT energy results demonstrate that human survivability is driven mainly by cognition, 39%, and adaptation, 35%, which together account for 74% of total survival energy. Physical strength contributes only 26% and plays a secondary role. In contrast, the pig relies heavily on physical strength, 52%, with limited support from cognition, 29%, and adaptation, 19%. This viscoplastic energy distribution imbalance constrains the pig to a low cognition, strength, dominated region that collapses rapidly after maturity. The VMT stress-strain trajectories reinforce this distinction. Human curves rise steeply from youth to maturity, driven by rapid expansion in cognition and adaptation, and remain in the upper domain even in old age. Pig curves, however, rise mainly through strength and flatten early, followed by a significant decline at the elderly stage. The human path shows an irreversible expansion. The pig path shows early saturation and late collapse. The TDA results confirm these same findings from a geometric perspective. The human data point cloud forms a rising, expanding manifold that migrates upward into a high cognition, high adaptation domain beginning at P3, youth. Persistent homology reveals long-lived structures that remain stable through P5, elderly, indicating a robust and continuous survival geometry. In contrast, the pig data point cloud spreads mostly along the strength axis, remains extremely thin in cognition and adaptation, and folds inward at P5, elderly, as strength declines. No persistent geometric features survive into late life. The human topology becomes increasingly multidimensional. The pig topology remains flat and ultimately contracts. Together, these results show that human evolutionary success did not arise from physical force, but from dynamic, nonlinear, and cumulative gains in cognition and adaptability. These two stressors generate larger viscoplastic energy areas, deeper geometric persistence, and stronger, long-term survival structures than physical strength can ever provide. I have also identified that the successful experiences in my life journey were mainly the result of my wisdom, brain, a physiological function, and my care for others. Heart, a psychological function, not from physical strength or any desire for material possessions. In summary, the zoology VPT analysis demonstrates that cognition and adaptation are the fundamental engines of biological survivability in complex species. Physical strength alone cannot sustain long-term evolutionary progress. The scientific implication is clear: human beings became the most intelligent and capable species, not because of stronger bodies, but because of the nonlinear and dynamic expansion of cognitive ability and adaptive flexibility. This combination created advantages in learning, innovation, problem solving, culture, and environmental mastery, leading to the survival dominance of the human species on Earth. A short self-reflection. After finishing this zoology paper, I wondered why this research idea suddenly appeared in my mind. I guess that after my stroke on June 21, 2025, neuroplasticity is working hard, either regenerating new neurons, or reconnecting my existing brain storage areas with newly formed pathways. This medical crisis reminded me of my past experience, designing AI algorithms that place millions of transistors, similar to neurons, and connect tens of millions of wires, similar to neural pathways, in semiconductor chip design. That process is remarkably similar to how the human brain works. After a stroke, the brain often enters a period of heightened neuroplasticity. In this phase, the brain can rewire old pathways, create new connections, recruit unused circuits, strengthen weak regions, release stored knowledge that was not accessible before. This process may have created this unexpected insight or miracle. References. Here is a short reference list, grouped by my 3 selected input: stressors, cognition, adaptation, strength. Cognition. Marino 2015, Pig Cognition Review. Geeling 2011, Pig Learning and Memory. Lee 2020, Behavioral Flexibility Model. Adaptation. Lee 2020, Flexibility as Adaptation. Reimer 2013, Flexibility and Survival. Strength, Reichland 2011, Exercise Capacity and Brain Size. Disclaimer, I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical or financial advice. No doctor-patient or advisor-client relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.